In the forgotten hills of Virginia, a silence older than time hides the story of a bloodline that should never have existed. A line of men bound not by legacy, but by a secret so dark it swallowed generations whole. This isn't about love, betrayal, or redemption. It's about control, isolation, and a man who believed purity was worth any cost. His home became a shrine of silence, his sons molded by fear, and his rules carved deeper than any grave. No outsiders dared approach, no voices broke the quiet, and no one left unchanged. Because once a man accepts that only his own blood is sacred, he creates something beyond family. He creates a curse that walks in his shadow forever. Welcome to the story of the Tate bloodline, a legacy of men who built their world on silence and buried every sin beneath it. Before we descend into this darkness, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. It helps us uncover stories that most men would rather leave buried. And when you finish this one, tell us where you're watching from. Because some names aren't meant to be spoken, but they still find a way to echo. Deep in the Appalachian backcountry stood a settlement no map cared to mark, a cluster of cabins known only to those who carried the same name, the same silence, the same unbroken line of men. The Tate men spoke little, hunted together, prayed together, and built fences high enough to keep out questions. Outsiders called them proud. Locals called them cursed. Inside the fences, they called it tradition. No women lived among them. None were ever invited. They believed creation began and ended with brotherhood, a covenant older than marriage, deeper than blood. Every son was trained to protect it. Their patriarch, Jonas Tate, ruled from a decaying farmhouse at the center of the hollow. He taught that noise weakened the spirit. Each boy learned to carve obedience before he learned to speak. Morning began with drills. Nights ended with sermons. Jonas stood before a fire, quoting lines from an unnamed book, saying the world beyond the ridge had already rotted. Only silence kept men clean. The hollow itself seemed to breathe with that belief. Trees leaned inward, muffling wind, swallowing echoes. Visitors sometimes vanished between pines, claiming the air grew too thick to carry their own voices back. No letters left the valley. No mail arrived. The nearest town forgot their faces decades ago. To outsiders, the Tates were folklore, men who aged without witnesses and buried each other before dawn. Among them was Leonard Tate, eldest son, heir to every rule his father preached. He didn't question them. Questioning was sin. He sharpened axes, mended roofs, and listened for the forest's heartbeat. Leonard's brothers admired his calm. He never shouted, never laughed, never slept past dawn. Jonas said that was proof the blood remembered its promise. Noise dies, he'd whisper, but lineage listens. Each season brought the same ceremony. The men gathered at the creek, washed their faces in freezing water, and cut their palms with flint, letting drops merge, renewing the oath that kept outsiders away. No one wrote the words down. The creed was spoken only once per generation, from father to son, near the dying embers of winter. Leonard heard it at 13 and never repeated it aloud. Years later, he could still taste iron when he recalled that night. Jonas had placed a hand on his shoulder, saying, "Our silence feeds the soil. Speak, and the ground forgets us." That belief became Leonard's spine. He watched strangers through the tree line. Hunters, hikers, surveyors, and marked every step they took. None were harmed, but none were welcomed. The hollow itself decided who left. As Jonas aged, the sermons grew darker. He warned of corruption spreading through radios, cities, and laughter. "Men outside obey money," he'd growl. "Men inside obey the hush." Leonard began carving symbols into the farmhouse beams, circles crossed with lines, old runes copied from Jonas's faded notebook. He didn't know their meaning, only that silence gathered beneath them like dust. At night, the brothers slept in separate rooms, though the walls were thin. Each man carried a small wooden charm around his neck, shaped like a closed mouth. None dared remove it. When storms came, thunder rolled but never echoed. Locals said the hollow swallowed sound. To the Tates, it was proof that heaven approved their quiet covenant. Leonard often dreamed of the outside. He'd see streets filled with light and motion, men shouting names he didn't recognize. He'd wake sweating, ashamed, afraid he'd spoken in sleep. Jonas forbade dreams of noise. He said such visions were temptations sent by the whisperers, unseen men who traded truth for chatter. To resist them was to stay pure. By the time Leonard turned 20, the hollow's silence had shaped him into something stoic, carved from routine and frost. He could track footsteps by vibration, sense lies by breath alone. One winter, a stranger wandered near the creek. He was thin, bearded, carrying a hunting rifle. Leonard watched from the trees, unseen, until the man whistled. That single note shattered everything. The sound pierced the hollow like lightning. Birds scattered, branches trembled. Leonard's heart raced, not from fear, but from recognition. He hadn't heard music since childhood, and it burned like sunlight behind his ribs. He returned home shaken. Jonas saw the tremor in his hands and understood. That night, the patriarch gathered his sons and declared the hollow unclean until the intruder's echo was forgotten. For 3 days, they fasted. Fires stayed cold. Even the dogs were muzzled. On the 4th dawn, Jonas led Leonard back to the creek. The stranger's footprints were gone, erased by snow. Jonas pressed his palm into the mud and whispered, "The ground remembers silence again." Leonard felt both relief and loss, like waking from a dream and finding the world quieter than before. Seasons blurred. Jonas grew frail but refused medicine. "Noise cures nothing," he rasped. "Stillness heals." Leonard built him a chair by the fire where he sat motionless, eyes open, barely breathing. When Jonas finally stopped breathing entirely, no one cried. They simply sealed the cabin windows and rang a single iron bell once. Its echo rolled down the valley, marking the end of an era. Leonard became patriarch without ceremony. The brothers knelt, waiting for his command. He spoke softly. "The oath stands, the fences hold, speak only to remember." And they obeyed. Years passed. The hollow remained untouched by change. Leonard walked its paths like a warden of memory, counting graves, whispering names, ensuring each rested in silence. He believed peace required discipline. Yet sometimes he felt the forest breathing differently, like it wanted to speak. Branches creaked in rhythm, almost forming words. He'd stop, heart pounding, wondering if the whisperers were real after all. One evening, wind tore through the valley, carrying distant laughter. It wasn't loud, just human. Leonard froze. The sound came from beyond the ridge, faint but undeniable, a reminder that men still spoke elsewhere. He returned home furious, boarded windows tighter, deepened ditches along the fence line. "No more echoes," he muttered. "No more intrusion." But deep inside, curiosity pulsed like a forbidden drumbeat. The brothers noticed his restlessness. Some whispered that Leonard was changing, that the silence had begun to consume him. Others said he was hearing what Jonas once warned of, the call of the outside. Late one night, Leonard lit a candle and opened Jonas's old notebook. Between cryptic sketches lay a single phrase he'd never read before. "When silence grows hungry, it devours its own." He stared at the words until the flame guttered out. In that darkness, he understood. The oath wasn't protection, it was a cage. The quiet wasn't keeping corruption away, it was keeping them in. From that night, the hollow felt different. The trees leaned closer, the air thicker. Leonard began to sense movement under the soil, as if the generations buried there were shifting in their graves. He started walking the boundary each dawn, repeating his father's sermons, testing the air for sound. But every morning the woods answered with something new. Faint murmurs like men arguing beneath the earth. One sunrise, the creek itself spoke. Water bubbled in odd cadence, forming syllables that almost made sense. Leonard knelt, trembling, realizing silence had turned alive. It was no longer obedience, but hunger. He ran back to the farmhouse and found his brothers awake, staring toward the hills. They'd heard it too. The valley wasn't quiet anymore. Something ancient was finally whispering back. That night, Leonard gathered them before the dying fire. "The oath has broken," he said. "We've kept still too long. The silence wants a voice." And for the first time, someone answered. A low hum rose among them, uneven, uncertain, but human. After decades of enforced quiet, sound returned to the Tate bloodline. The hollow shivered, listening, as if the earth itself exhaled at last. After Jonas's death, the farmhouse felt hollow yet watchful. Leonard Tate inherited not only the keys, but the weight of every vow whispered in that dim room of timber and smoke. The brothers cleaned nothing. Dust was considered sacred. It carried their father's breath. They sealed the upstairs rooms, leaving only the hall where the fire burned and prayers echoed without sound. Every dawn, Leonard walked through the house with an unlit lantern, tracing walls with his fingers, whispering the creed under his breath. Silence feeds strength. Noise breeds decay. It became his heartbeat. His brothers followed behind, copying each gesture precisely. To stumble was shame. To cough was punishment. The house learned their rhythm until even the floorboards moved to the pace of their restraint. Weeks slipped by. Food was gathered from traps and stored in jars. Conversation vanished. When communication was needed, they tapped the walls. 3 knocks for yes, 1 for no. Soon, the farmhouse seemed to speak back. At night, the wood popped in deliberate cadence, echoing their own secret code. The men pretended not to hear, though each felt watched. Leonard wrote daily notes in Jonas's old ledger. Every entry ended with the same line: "The hollow listens." Ink bled through pages, as if the book itself absorbed their fear. Rain arrived without warning, drenching the valley. Thunder rolled but never cracked. It hummed. Leonard stood on the porch, realizing the storm matched their tapping rhythm. Nature answering discipline with imitation. Inside, the brothers gathered around the cold hearth. One of them, Eli, asked quietly, "Do you think it's father?" Leonard's glare silenced him, but doubt rippled through the room like wind. They resumed fasting. Hunger cleared thought, Leonard claimed. On the 3rd day, he heard breathing from the ceiling, slow, patient, male. When he looked up, dust drifted down like ash. He climbed the stairs. The locked rooms groaned. He unlocked none. Instead, he pressed his ear to each door, hearing faint murmurs repeating his name. Every voice sounded like his brother's. That night, he ordered new locks forged from iron scavenged in the barn. "If silence breaks, metal remembers," he said. The others obeyed, hammering until dawn in absolute quiet. The smell of burnt iron filled the house. When morning light pierced a crack, it illuminated symbols carved into the beams, marks none of them admitted carving, circles within mouths sealed shut. Leonard believed the house wanted order. He began assigning rooms. 1 brother per corner, 1 hallway left empty as offering. No one entered that corridor again. They called it the still line. Days merged. Each man became an echo of the other. Beards lengthened, eyes dimmed. Without sound, thought grew heavy, and the house breathed louder than the living. One evening, while mending a door hinge, Leonard found a scrap of parchment wedged beneath the floorboard. The handwriting was his father's. "When silence gathers, speak once or be devoured." He hid the note, fearing what speech might summon. Yet curiosity gnawed harder than hunger. That night he dreamed of Jonas sitting by the fire, lips moving but no sound forming. At dawn, Leonard woke to find ash arranged on the floor, spelling a single word. Listen. The others saw it too. No one claimed to have written it. Eli trembled. "Maybe we've angered the hollow," he whispered. Leonard struck him, shouting for the first time in years. The echo rolled through the house like thunder freed from chains. Afterward, everything changed. The air felt thicker, almost liquid. Shadows lengthened ahead of the light. The brothers avoided eye contact, afraid their thoughts might leak into the room. Leonard tried restoring order with stricter rules. No sleep before midnight, no firelight after. Each man had to kneel facing the wall for an hour to drain desire for speech. Obedience returned, but peace did not. The house creaked louder each night, boards swelling with unseen pressure. Sometimes it whispered names none of them recognized. Male names, ancient, guttural. Eli began carving those names into his arms with charcoal. "They keep me quiet," he claimed. Leonard burned the marks with candle flame, sealing them under soot and discipline. Rain leaked through the roof, drawing dark veins down the walls. When Leonard touched one, it pulsed beneath his fingers like a heartbeat. He withdrew, whispering, "The hollow bleeds." Outside, mist rolled thick as milk. Footprints appeared overnight, leading from the creek to the porch, all bare, all pointing inward. Every brother swore he hadn't walked there. Leonard sprinkled ash across the threshold. By morning, the prints had vanished, replaced by new ones descending into the cellar. He barred the door, but the hinges groaned like protest. Sleep abandoned them. Dreams carried whispers in male voices, orders, warnings, familiar tones stretched thin. One said, "Break the oath or become the echo." Leonard woke trembling each dawn. He tried to pray, but prayer required words. Instead, he pounded his chest twice, the ancient gesture meaning "I endure." The house answered with 2 knocks from below. Fear turned ritualistic. The brothers built wooden idols shaped like ears and buried them beneath door frames, believing silence would eat its own sound before reaching them. By late summer, rot crept through the foundation. No repair stopped it. The more they patched, the faster the boards blackened. The farmhouse seemed to reject being sealed. Eli vanished one night, his bed empty, his boots left by the door. Only a single phrase scratched into the window pane. Heard the call. No one dared speak his name. Leonard gathered the remaining brothers. "The hollow is testing us," he said. "If one breaks, the rest must stay still." They nodded, eyes hollow as the land around them. Days later, tapping returned in the walls, 5 beats repeating endlessly. Leonard realized it matched Jonas's heartbeat from memory. "He's not gone," he whispered. "He's listening through the wood." He ordered every man to carve their mark on the beams again, sealing the rhythm inside. The house groaned, settling deeper, as if swallowing the sound whole. That night, the fire burned blue. Smoke crawled along the ceiling like a living thing. In the flames, Leonard saw outlines of men with closed mouths, watching silently from the corners. He refused to fear them. "We built this," he muttered. "It remembers us." Then, for the first time since childhood, he sang, one note, low and trembling. The shadows shivered. The note echoed back twice. The house had learned to respond. Leonard fell to his knees, weeping quietly, realizing their silence had never been solitude. It had been conversation all along. Morning brought calm. The brothers stood outside, faces pale with exhaustion. Leonard looked at the farmhouse, its windows dark, and whispered, "It speaks now. We just forgot how to listen." He walked toward the creek, the others following wordlessly. Behind them, the house groaned once more, a deep, satisfied breath, as if acknowledging that the men inside were finally part of its voice. Smoke had always been part of the hollow, but this smoke was different, thicker, slower, almost deliberate. Leonard Tate stood outside the farmhouse, staring as it bled gray breath into the morning. He didn't panic. Fire was not an intruder here. It was a consequence. Every oath burned eventually. The house had simply grown tired of carrying what men refused to confess. The brothers gathered silently beside him, faces smudged with ash, eyes reflecting the glow. None ran for water. None shouted. They watched as walls folded inward like weary lungs. Leonard whispered, "It chose its own ending." His voice cracked. No one corrected him. After years of silence, words sounded fragile, like glass touched after decades of frost. When the roof collapsed, a gust of warm air washed over them, smelling of pine, iron, and time. It felt less like destruction and more like something finally exhaling. They didn't rebuild. Instead, they camped at the edge of the creek, sleeping beneath tarps, guarding the blackened frame as if waiting for it to speak one last time. Eli's absence weighed on them. Some claimed to see him in the smoke, his outline flickering between beams. Others said the fire consumed not just wood, but the memories themselves. Leonard wrote nothing in the ledger for 7 days. On the 8th, he drew a single line across a blank page. No words, no explanation. The ink dried before touching paper. Rain arrived that night, gentle and slow. It hissed against the ruins, forming puddles that mirrored firelight long after the flames had died. The reflection looked like ghosts breathing underwater. Leonard took that as a sign. "The silence is cleansing itself," he told the others. They nodded, pretending to believe. None of them had slept properly in weeks. Every creak of the forest sounded like a whisper. Every gust of wind carried their names. The hollow, once loyal to their vow, now spoke freely through echoes and ash. At dawn, Leonard found the ledger open beside the ashes, though he hadn't placed it there. Across a fresh page was written, "Remember what silence costs." The handwriting was his own. He burned that page. The flame turned blue again. The brothers watched quietly, understanding that whatever force had ruled their house was now ruling their memories. Days became indistinct. Food dwindled. The youngest brother, Aaron, began drawing circles in the dirt, whispering arithmetic like a chant. Leonard let him, fearing silence would swallow sanity. Each night they built a small fire and recited their creed, though the words now sounded hollow. Leonard often stopped mid-line, staring into the embers as if expecting a reply. One evening, he spoke without realizing it. "We are the echo," he murmured. Aaron looked up. "What if the echo wants to forget?" Leonard had no answer. The next morning, footprints appeared again, bare, male, leading away from camp toward the ridge. Leonard followed them until they vanished at the creek's bend, where the water ran red with clay. There he found a single object, the wooden charm of a closed mouth, his father's symbol, half burned yet intact. Leonard clenched it tight, feeling it pulse faintly against his palm. He brought it back and hung it above the campfire. "Father's watching," he said. None corrected him, though each wondered if Jonas was guardian or jailer now. That night the wind shifted direction. Smoke from the ruins blew straight toward camp, curling into shapes that resembled men kneeling in prayer. Aaron refused to look. Leonard didn't sleep. He sat by the dying coals until dawn, repeating Jonas's warning. When silence grows hungry, it devours its own. He now understood. The hollow was starving. At sunrise, the brothers returned to the ruins. The ground still steamed. Beneath the ash, they found the iron locks Jonas had forged, melted together into one twisted mass like fused voices. Leonard touched it and whispered, "It's all one now." The metal trembled slightly beneath his fingers, humming the rhythm of their old tapping code, a heartbeat resurrected in iron. The others stepped back, afraid. It's alive, Aaron said. Leonard shook his head. No, it remembers. He lifted the melted locks and placed them inside a wooden chest. From that day, the chest became their altar. Every evening they knelt before it, heads bowed, waiting for the faint hum that replaced prayer. It was faith without speech. Months passed. The forest grew over the ruins, vines weaving through black beams, birds nesting in charred rafters. Life returned, but not to the men who had survived it. Leonard rarely spoke anymore. When he did, it was to the chest. "Tell me what's left," he'd whisper. Sometimes faint tapping answered, like the house breathing through memory. One winter morning, Aaron found Leonard asleep by the creek, frost on his beard, hand still clutching the charm. His breath came slow, steady, but his eyes moved beneath the lids. When he woke, he said, "I saw them, all of them, standing in the smoke. They were waiting for me to listen." Aaron asked, "Did you?" Leonard only smiled. From then on, Leonard kept to himself. He spent hours carving new symbols into the stones around camp, spirals intersecting with closed mouths, each line measured like heartbeat intervals. The others grew restless. They wanted purpose beyond remembering. Leonard's faith was turning into obsession, and the hollow's quiet was no longer comforting. It was suffocating. Then, one cold evening, the wind returned, fierce and sudden. Sparks rose from their fire, carried uphill toward the ruins. Aaron swore he saw a figure walking within the glow. Leonard followed the embers. They floated ahead like lanterns, leading him to the place where the farmhouse once stood. There, amid the soot, a single door frame remained upright. He stepped through it. On the other side, nothing waited, just darkness that smelled of ash and pine. Yet he felt warmth, like breath against his ear, whispering, "Welcome back." The brothers found him hours later, kneeling in the ashes, eyes open, unblinking, humming the old tapping rhythm with his tongue against his teeth. The door frame still stood untouched. They carried him back to camp, but Leonard refused food or fire. He claimed he'd heard the hollow's true voice. "It isn't silence," he said softly, "it's remembering." The following night, Leonard walked alone to the ridge. Aaron tried to follow but lost his trail halfway. Only his footprints returned, leading back toward the smoldering ruins. By dawn, the campfire had died out. The chest sat open, empty, the melted locks gone. In their place lay a single charcoal mark drawn in dirt, a circle within a mouth. Aaron understood then. The hollow had claimed its patriarch again, not as punishment, but as completion. Silence, after all, had never been their prison. It was their inheritance. As the sun rose, he bowed his head, feeling the ground pulse beneath him. The soil hummed faintly, echoing Leonard's rhythm, whispering in the old tongue of men who refused to forget. Decades passed before another man dared step into the hollow. Maps no longer marked it, but whispers carried through taverns, hunting clubs, and faded police reports about the silent brotherhood. One of those whispers reached Daniel Price, a field researcher drawn to forgotten settlements. He wasn't chasing ghosts. He was chasing proof that isolation could shape men's minds into mythology. He arrived one mist-covered morning, his truck tires crunching gravel where a road once ended. The forest swallowed all sound, exactly as legend described. Even his breath seemed to vanish mid-air. Daniel set up camp near the old creek, unaware that generations of Tates had called this water sacred. He took samples, wrote notes, and felt the hush settling inside his chest. By nightfall, the woods began to breathe again, long, slow inhalations that matched his heartbeat. He thought it was wind until the rhythm synchronized perfectly, as if the valley listened back. In his journal, Daniel wrote, "No birds, no insects, only pulse. The ground hums when I speak my name. He read it aloud once. The echo didn't return. The next morning, he followed faint footprints embedded in moss, perfectly preserved, leading toward a clearing. In its center stood a stone altar, blackened by age, carved with overlapping closed mouths. He traced one symbol and felt warmth beneath the stone, as though the earth itself remembered touch. When he pressed harder, a low tone vibrated through his palm. Daniel pulled back quickly. Subsonic resonance? He muttered, trying to rationalize what felt alive. The tone faded, but something unseen adjusted its rhythm to his breathing. He camped beside the altar that night, recording audio. Playback revealed nothing, just static shaped like breath. Yet he swore he heard distant tapping, counting in groups of 5. Back in town, locals warned him not to stay. An old trapper named Mason said, "Those men never left. They just changed shape." Daniel laughed it off, then returned anyway. 2 days later, he found the ruins, just as rumor described. The farmhouse lay buried under vines, doorframe still upright, ashes frozen beneath a crust of soil and fern. He stepped through the frame, notebook in hand. For a heartbeat, sound disappeared entirely. Even his heartbeat stopped reaching his ears. Then the air whispered a single word: "Listen." Daniel froze. He recognized the cadence from archived Tate ledgers he'd studied. 5 beats, pause, 2 beats. The Brotherhood's code for "We Remain." He began digging carefully where the hearth once stood. Beneath layers of soot, he unearthed a small iron chest, rusted but intact. Its surface hummed when touched, faint as memory. Inside lay 3 wooden charms, each carved with a closed mouth and circled in ash. Daniel realized the design matched carvings on Jonas Tate's journal cover. He filmed everything, narrating softly for documentation. Artifacts consistent with early isolationist ritual, possibly self-reinforcing belief system. His voice trembled despite himself. The hollow seemed to absorb his words greedily. That night, while reviewing footage, the sound cut out midway. On screen, his lips moved, but the recording captured only silence, followed by a faint answering hum from somewhere off camera. At dawn, Mason hiked in to find him. The camp was intact, coffee still warm, notebook open on a page that read simply, "The silence learned my name." Search parties combed the valley for weeks. No trace of Daniel surfaced except the recorder buried near the creek. When played back, it emitted 5 knocks, pause, 2, again and again. Officials dismissed it as malfunction. But Mason knew that rhythm. His grandfather had warned of it, calling it the blood counting. He sealed the recorder in a tin box and left. Years later, another explorer discovered Daniel's footage on an old forum. The final frame showed a man, thin, bearded, standing beyond the altar, his face half lit by moonlight. Some swore it was Leonard Tate, unchanged by time. Others insisted it was Daniel himself, altered by whatever he'd awakened. No expert could verify either claim. The legend grew. Travelers avoided the hollow, yet its name appeared in whispered conversations about lost expeditions and unexplained audio phenomena. Men who vanished chasing their own echoes. Eventually, a documentary crew ventured in. All men, skeptical, armed with modern equipment. They found the same clearing, same stone altar, same humming soil. They left recorders overnight. When they returned, every file contained identical audio, a man's voice repeating in measured rhythm, "Speak once or be devoured." None recognized the voice, though one insisted it sounded familiar. Months later, the lead researcher woke from a dream murmuring that phrase aloud. His roommate recorded him unconsciously tapping the old 5-2 pattern on the wall between breaths. News outlets labeled it folklore. Online forums argued over authenticity, but those who had been there refused interviews, claiming they still felt the hollow's rhythm under their skin. Meanwhile, the valley stayed empty. Trees grew over the road, streams shifted course, and the earth sealed its secrets again. Yet hikers reported moments where sound simply vanished mid-step. Each described the same sensation, a warmth in the chest, like someone breathing through them. None stayed long. Most returned pale, refusing to speak of what they'd heard. In the state archives, one unnamed file sits sealed under restricted access. Its label reads, Case Your T 1968, the Tate Brotherhood. Inside rests Daniel's final page, smudged but legible. It says, Silence never dies. It migrates. Beneath the words, a small symbol drawn in graphite, circle within a mouth. The paper hums faintly when touched. To this day, those who research the case report subtle interference. Recordings mute themselves, microphones fail, and background noise rearranges into rhythmic pulses that match the Brotherhood's creed. Some claim the phenomenon is electromagnetic. Others say it's psychological, expectation shaping perception. But a few insist the hollow's silence is alive, searching for men who still remember. On rare nights, hunters camping nearby report hearing low humming carried by wind. It's never random, it counts. 5 beats, pause, 2, always ending with one whispered word, listen. They leave offerings, coins, carvings, sometimes names etched on bark, hoping to appease what lingers beneath the soil. The valley accepts them quietly, never returning a sound. And so the story remains unfinished, handed from one man to another, like an oath older than speech. Each retelling sharpens the rhythm, ensuring the hollow never truly sleeps. If you ever stand where the road ends and the trees begin to breathe, remember the Tate's warning. Silence isn't absence, it's invitation. Speak once, and the hollow will answer. And the hollow. The legend endures because men built it, fed it, and left it hungry. It will feed again, not on words, but on the pauses between them, the blood of silence itself.